Hey everybody, it's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And thanks for being here with us this evening.
Yeah.
So I guess we usually start with a fishing report. So I guess where do we start?
Yeah, so I don't know. So the weather's been kind of crazy. Like we were in 80 degrees not too long ago, and now all of a sudden it's like 40 degrees and like fishing opener weather, and it was kind of crazy fishing. We saw a lot of people just trying to, pull fish from anywhere from the shallow to the deep, and it didn't really seem to be working for them. But we found some fish. Yeah, we found some fish. A little bit shallower than I would have expected. The temperature was right there at 62 degrees, and we ended up we ended up just throwing bobbers mostly.
This past weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about fishing opener. I was a little bit lost. That's why I was hesitating.
Oh, no, that's my head rambling. That's just my head rambling. I'm trying to. We skipped a week in here, so like we have 2 weeks of stuff to talk about.
I'm getting a little bit distracted because I hate to say this on the podcast. I think you have a tick on your cheek.
Tick on my cheek?
Yeah, on your cheek, like way down. Were you outside all day?
No.
Go get rid of that. Ew. So while Josh does that, sorry, that was totally not planned. I guess that's one of the things that we have seen so far this year is it has been definitely tick season in the Northwoods. And so when Josh was talking about boat season, I think that's one of the reasons that we have avoided, I guess, trout fishing and stuff. So I guess we don't normally talk about that, but just kind of funny note while it kind of came up. The other thing though, is Josh was talking about this past weekend and the weather conditions were a little bit crazy. And because we did see this cool front that pushed in. Now, the funny thing happened though, that like Josh was mentioning, we had a whole bunch of warm weather push in just before that. So the fish this time of year, when the water starts to warm up, sometimes fish get really distracted. So sometimes fish are going towards that spawn and everything. So what we noticed is that there were beds that were starting to be made. But the fish had left those beds because I think that water temperature had dropped back down. So, I mean, the nice thing was that the fish, even though it was a cold front, I can't say that the fish were really super reacting like it was a cold front. Because, I think as the time of the year pushes forward, we're getting close to the spawn and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, if I heard you correctly, like the fish were up shallow, and I think what had happened was some of the places we were fishing had warmed up with that warm weather and those sunny days. And then when it got cold, the water didn't necessarily cool down as fast as the air, we felt the cool down. And I think those fish just kind of really just backed off of the spawn proper, right? I think there was still some spawning going on. Some of them went back to like staging, and I think it was just kind of mixed all over. So we went to, where did we go? Oh, we were over at the Wolf River. Did you mention that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, so we ran down to the Wolf River for a day. That was pretty fun. We met some friends down there. They were up for the white bass run. White bass run. I guess we've never really had like one of those awesome days, like 100 fish days that you hear about, right? Like I've never hit it super great, and this year wasn't any exception.
And why? I guess like why? So what? I mean, we've learned a lot at this point. So why do we never get it?
I guess I don't know. There's a lot of moving around, and there's just it's really hard for me to pin down those fish because there is a lot of moving around and there's a lot of people that are just stationary. So it's hard for me to kind of pick. It's not like picking out structure. It's not like picking out, exact places. It's just knowing where the fish kind of are and kind of keeping an eye on. And a lot of people have like friend groups, so you have multiple boats, and then you can kind of communicate who's getting bit where. And we just haven't had that, we've thrown flies, we've thrown spinners, and the Wolf River rigs, and you got lucky. You caught one vertical jigging on a corner. That was pretty fun. Surprised everybody kind of. But it just is. It's just one of those things that we've never had a whole bunch of luck with. So I kind of made a decision and decided we were going to go for some bluegills and crappies, and we had a lot more success doing that.
Well, and I think that's something that people have a really hard time tracking down, especially this time of year. So tell us a little bit about, like, what are tips for people who are looking for panfish, whether it is this time of year or I guess as we push into summer.
So I guess with my where my brain's at this time of year is I really try to focus on the part where, like, all fish spawn, no matter if it's panfish or walleyes or whatever. Anything spawning has a bell curve, right? So you have this really high peak of activity, and it kind of tapers off, and there's fish in between that on the sides of that bell curve that are either done spawning early or start spawning late. And so I kind of always try and stay in that zone where it's either post-spawn fish or pre-spawn fish. I really try not to mess with the nesting fish, and that's just a personal preference. So I'm looking at bottom transitions and structure right outside of nesting areas. Depth is depending on the lake, right? I try and focus on the second third of the depth. So if you have a lake that only gets 10 feet deep, that might be 3 to 4 feet, where their spawning might be 1 to 2 feet of water. You might want to focus on 3 to 4, 4 to 5, whatever. And but and so that's kind of where my head is at, is kind of focusing on that middle. And this time of year, I'm doing a lot more of the float fishing, just because the bait is a lot more in the strike zone. You can fish it a lot slower. You can also fish it fast, and there's not really any weed lines or anything really good to troll against right now. This is a lot of times I feel like it's more reaction bites, unless it's like heavy post spawn, and then they're starting to feed up again. But by the time, like, I'm thinking crappie post spawn comes through heavy, like you're on the backside of that bell curve, then your weeds are starting to come up, and you're able to start kind of our trolling bite again.
Are you trolling the river?
Sometimes trolling the bayou. I wouldn't troll the main channel necessarily. That's on the river. I'm looking for large pieces of structure, big log jams. I'm not looking for like treetops. I'm looking for like big sections of logs that have jammed up against each other. That's where our our anchor poles, like our fiberglass anchors, we have manual ones, and we have one on the bow and one on the stern of the boat. And that really helped us while we were fishing the Wolf be able to maneuver the boat in a way around those pieces of structure that you're not touching it, because that's really important. If you touch it, those fish kind of like suck in, where a lot of times they're like sitting out or just behind waiting for stuff to come by. But if you bump that structure, they all kind of get spooky, and then you have to leave it alone for a while. You can always come back, but yeah. All right, let's look. Questions. So Troy's asking if we were using plastics or live bait for the panfish. So so I would say 85-90% of the fish that you see all year long that we catch are going to be on plastics. That's just a personal preference of ours. And we just have we have a really good ratio of hookup. Once in a while we'll end up with a bite where it's really tough. Yeah, we don't often get skunked with plastics. There are days where I know that, like, maybe if we had some like live bait, it would be a lot better of a bite. But you know, almost always, unless it's winter time, I think we're fishing plastics.
What is your go-to plastic? How do you choose?
Well, so there's a couple different factors. So a lot of times we have clear water up here, so we go with the old adage, like if it's a dark day, use dark colors. If it's a light day, use light colors, and then just kind of move on from there. There's some bodies of water that are super tannic, so they're really coffee colored. In that case, I tend to lean more towards the dark colors, just because most of the time those fish living in that dark water are fishing or are like hunting shadows basically. And so I stick with the darker colors. But yeah, I mean, I almost always throw chartreuse at some point in the day. Pink is another one. Those two I feel like are some reactionary bites. If I haven't gotten a bite on any colors, really, like, you get one bite here and then not, and then you switch and then you get another bite and not. I almost always default to pink in that situation, because that means that, to me, that means the fish aren't very active. So then I'll go to a reactionary color, and it just seems like almost all fish eating other little fish will hit pink. How about you?
I usually put on an opposite color of whatever you're doing because I like to try to hone in on the fish.
Yeah, so man, it's hard to describe, this last weekend's fishing, because there wasn't really any rhyme or reason besides depth, and it was just fish that had started spawning or had started coming up to spawn, and then they just pushed back off a little bit because of the water temperature decrease. So it was I don't know, like you mentioned, we caught a lot of fish last weekend, but you mentioned to me in the boat, like, oh, I wouldn't say it was fast and furious, and it's like, well, we really caught a lot of fish, but like, when you say fast and furious, we weren't like, every single cast there wasn't a fish, but we had a few doubles, so that's pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. How about, like, what are you looking for this time of year for size of jigs? Like, what are you looking for?
I always start small because it's like a match the hatch. Like everything is tiny right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go back and forth. I think it just really depends on, to me, a lot of time it'll depend on the body of water too. I think some places that we fish tend to have bigger fish, so I tend to like want to throw bigger stuff. And then if I know that maybe there's a chance of catching something big, but most of the time it's going to be like eater fish or something, then I might stick to the smaller side of the spectrum. I think one of the important things is to kind of match your presentation to, if you're using a float, in a cast and retrieve type style. I think it's important to match your float. So a lot of times I use a float that works really well at that 150th or 148th. So then I can kind of go between like a 32nd and a 64th, because they're kind of on the one's on the lighter side and one's on the heavier side for that bobber setup. But then I have that kind of a range. But just to know where your float performs, I think helps you overall, because you had a lot of up bites even in shallow water. So that, to me, that would I would think that meant that there was fish out towards the boat, like a little bit deeper, and your bait was coming down, and even at shallow water, they were coming up and hitting it from underneath. And so to have like your bait match your float and be able to see that, like, I think you caught a lot of bites, doing that.
That was important.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what else? Um, yeah, I guess it wasn't a whole lot technique wise that was like super complicated. We just went out there and kind of, I think there was a lot of just like, in my mind, just thinking about like where would I think they would be. And
Well, it was chasing the warmest water. It wasn't about thinking. There was no guessing. We were looking for the warmest water, and our graph was telling us that. And when we got too far, we were turning around because it wasn't, you were looking for, it wasn't just the wind blowing side, because that's the thing, is that the days before, the wind had been blowing a completely different direction. And so, like you were saying, like, guess. And then, I mean, I guess when we get there, that's kind of where we start. But then it is not a guessing game. Our graph was telling us that. So all we had to do was watch the water temperature. And we were finding that when we found that warmest water is exactly where the fish were, but that in the warmest, because like you're saying, like, over here is the warmest, and then maybe not so much and coldest out here, and so as we honed in is where we were finding more fish, but in that middle warmest zone is where we were finding things like bluegills, and that was hard to find in the other parts of the lake. So that was a pretty big key, and will be until summer, until the fish get sick of the heat, until they are done with that spawn, until they push out, until those weeds grow. So a lot of times you will get used to, what is the max temperature of the lakes around you? I don't expect you to know that like off the top of your head, right? But you will be able to identify that point as we get there into that part of the season. Again, a big part of that is that spawn. Is it still happening? Is it over? What are those fish doing? Because those temperatures will tell you all of that.
that's a good point. We were doing some driving around, and a couple weeks prior, we had seen some big schools floating around, and I don't think we saw any schools of panfish like out in the deeper waters. So the majority of them had pushed up. Yeah, I think on the lake we caught a really good amount of really decent sized bluegills. But on the river, I feel like our crappies were pretty good. Hey everybody, thanks for stopping in. We're just chatting here, so if you have any questions or anything, just throw them in the comments. Otherwise, we're just kind of rehashing the last couple weeks. Well, did you tell them what happened to us?
No, the tick that we just found, they knew that. They were here for that.
No. I was talking about the grouse that flew through our bedroom window. Hey, Gene. Yeah, so we were like,
all kinds of bad luck lately.
We were like waking up, and all of a sudden, just like smash, like somebody had thrown a rock or like something big through our window, and then we're like,
there was not even a thud. It was just the sound of very loud shattering glass everywhere. And lo and behold, it was a grouse.
Yeah.
But that's not fishing related.
It's interesting though. We had to deal with that. So what are you are we planning? So we're running north this weekend. Are we planning on bringing some bobbers with?
I thought so. You tell me, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to be running up to the UP and just kind of driving around, camping around, just seeing what's going on up there. And yeah, I think it's worth bringing a rod with, see what's going on. Yeah, I guess I don't I don't know. This is not my this is not my favorite time of year to fish. Honestly, everyone, like I I just don't like messing with fish on the beds. And so like sometimes we have some really good luck with some pre-spawn fish, and then there's that little, it's that peak spawn where it's like then it gets kind of slow for us because we know we can see you can see all the fish swimming around up in the shallows, and you just have to leave them alone. And then but then after that the weeds start coming up and the bite starts getting good. I like July fishing, August fishing. That's some of my favorite summertime fishing.
I'm ready for the fall and ice fishing.
Fall and ice. It hasn't even got above 40 degrees or 50 degrees this week.
That's why I'm ready for ice.
Oh. All right. Well, shoot. Yeah, I wish I had more to talk about, but how about you? Do you have anything else?
Not really, to be honest. No, no, we talked about all those different things that I don't know. Like we said, it's kind of shallow. People, break out your favorite bobbers. Try a few different ones. There's a lot of different bobbers on the market these days. And so, a lot of people have old favorites and stuff, but I guess it's just the time of year, go out and try something new. And it's also, if you have a nice calm day, try to set up more than one setup, and so especially for those people who get really caught up in using live bait, worms, minnows, whatever that is, go for it, set one up, but maybe have a secondary rod, try a new type of bobber, or maybe put a plastic on it if that's not something that you're super used to. And because this is just a great time of the year where I guess, we were talking about leaving some of those bedding fish alone, but before and after, especially those fish, they are on the chew, you'll get bites, and get kids out on the water, get friends, get family, get all those different people out because, like we're saying, try new things. The other thing is sometimes use the other people in your boat. In the most kind of ways, right? But, like we're saying, I start with a small setup and I made a snarky comment. I always choose a color opposite of what Josh uses, right? But that's tactic, right? And so you can set up your boat. If you have different kids, different people, different neighbors with you, they can each have different jig heads or plastics or whatever. And the more different options that you can try along the way is the quicker that you will hopefully find success, right? As long as you're not being too silly and just slapping around out there, right? Fish do get kind of freaked out. But, it's a great time to try those new things and do those new things and be out there because the weather is, well, I was going to say great. It's been a little bit cool, but there's warm weather to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. Just trying new stuff often leads to success. Even if you're not exactly sure what you're doing, I think a lot of times that has a better effect because it's not the same as everybody else is doing, if that makes any sense. You're using a technique, but you might not be doing it the same way everybody else is. And that might be the one thing that day. You never know.
Zach, you said that you hear that we have a boat and you can come fishing with us anytime. Literally, just contact us.
Here's one for you, Emily.
Oh, no. Do you ever use braid on your bobber setup? Of course we do all the time. We use we use braid and leader material on all of our rods.
I don't.
Yeah, I do.
I don't.
I do. I use braid on every single.
Yeah, so we have fins set up on almost all of our rods. All of Emily's rods have fins number 4 braid in Wind Tamer because she likes the pink. I have the yellow Wind Tamer. I have yellow crappie, and on my bobber rod, I like to use. I wish I could remember. I wish I could remember the company, but I use a steelhead mono. I think it might be actually Sunline Super Float 2. I think is what I use on that. It's a 6-pound mono, and I run that to a swivel, and I run either 4 or 6-pound fluorocarbon leader underneath the swivel. And depending on how deep I'm fishing, that fluorocarbon leader might only be 6 inches. It might be 2 feet, just depending how much water I have to work with. The longer that I can get away with, the better. But obviously in a foot of water you need to have it up off the bottom. So and I like the I like having the swivel in there on almost all of my setups that I'm either using a jig in plastic or my float, just because I feel that it keeps a lot of the line twist out. And so that is the main reason I use a swivel. I really haven't had too much bad luck with it. Maybe forgetting to check my line once in a while to make sure that I'm free of nicks or something. But other than that, that's how I kind of run my setup is I like the mono because it floats, and I think that it gives your action on your bait, especially plastics, or it gives the plastics better action with when your line is floating, just because you're able to manipulate it. And when your line sinks, it tends to pull your bobber underneath the water before it pops back up. And sometimes, especially in shallow water or clear water, that bobber can either spook fish, or you have fish hitting your bobber because it looks like an injured fish or something, and you want them to hit the bait that's under the float. Sometimes I think that we should have hooks on our bobbers, but yeah. So I don't know, roundabout way, Troy. Emily runs braid. She likes it. I like to run mono on mine. Personal preference. All right. Well, I think that is all I have, Emily, unless you have anything else. We're gonna have, we have a fun adventure coming up this weekend, so we'll be posting a lot about that. I hope. Hopefully, we're
It's not
successful
fishing.
on it. Not all of it, no, but it's just an adventure to the UP, so should be fun. Got anything else?
No.
All right.
I guess with that, thanks to everybody for joining us this evening, and we're looking forward to seeing everyone on next week's edition of The Night Fight.
Night, everybody.